Okay. Chodesh Tov, Beit Nisan, Yutet Amud Beis 19b. The bottom by the Mishnah. Ein solin basar, batzal, ubeitza el kadesh yitzolu mibod yom. You may not roast meat, onions, and eggs on Erev Shabbat unless you put them in the you roasted them with enough time so that they would be roasted on Friday. Okay. Now we know that Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel have a machloket. If your kelim can do melacha on Shabbat, and it will just happen by itself, the only issue will be your kelim. Beit Shammai says problem. Beit Hillel says no problem. So what? But over here, there's no machloket. Here, even Beit Hillel, the Mishnah doesn't say, but Beit Hillel says okay. It says ein solin. Everybody agrees. So therefore, that means that Beit Hillel agrees here. And we saw this before already. That in the last 2 days, that Beit Hillel agrees when there's a nu chashash. This has nothing to do with your kelim doing melacha on Shabbat. This has to do with the chashash of shema yechateh begechalim. Maybe he will mix around the coals to speed up the process so you can eat this at night and will be ready. Therefore, we're worried about that. That is a real chashash that even Beit Hillel agrees to, and therefore it's only mutar if what? It's only mutar mibod yom. If it will be ready mibod yom. Okay. Next halacha. Enot nimpat litanurim chashecha. Same halacha. Bread that they would slap onto the walls of the oven. You can't place the bread into the oven im chashecha, meaning before it's dark. V'lo charara, and not a biscuit al gabe gechalim, on top of the coals. Ela kadei sheyikrimu paneha, unless its face will become darkened. Okay? Now, seemingly the simple pshat is the top of it will get dark. Mibod yom on Friday. Otherwise, if it won't, we're worried that you'll be nervous that your bread won't be ready for the meal, and you'll shema yechateh begechalim. Again, Rabbi Eliezer Omer kadesh yikro matachton shalah. The bottom is what has to get. Now the Gemara is going to have a question what Rabbi Eliezer means, and since the Gemara is going to have a question about what Rabbi Eliezer means, those two sides of the question are really going to change not only Rabbi Eliezer, but also the way that we understood the Tana Kama that said Kadesh Yikrimu Paneh. We'll soon see. Okay. So basically the Gemara is going to ask if Rabbi Eliezer is being machmir or being mekel. We'll see. You let to bring down the carbon Pesach was brought on the 14th day of Nisan. And after they would sprinkle the blood in the Beit HaMikdash and burn certain parts of the animal on the Mizbeach, then the mitzvah would be to roast it and the owners to eat it. Bring it down, I think, because the tanner was below. So they would bring it down, im chashecha, even if Erev Pesach, which is the day that you bring the Korban Pesach, was Erev Shabbat. So you can bring it to the tanner im chashecha. And even if it won't get roasted, this is an exception. Even if it won't be roasted before, like all other meats that we just mentioned at the beginning of the Mishnah, en tolim basar, the first words in the Mishnah, Korban Pesach is different. Why? I'll see you in the Gemara. Uma'achizin et ha'u b'mdurat Beit HaMoked, and there was a place where the Kohanim would warm themselves up. There was a very large place. This Beit HaMoked, the house of the fire, of the furnace. That's where there was a fire there. So how much of that fire, if you're making a new fire with wood, had to be lit before Shabbat? Says the Mishnah, Machizin et ha'ur b'medurat Beit HaMoked, as long as some of the wood was lit beforehand, it's fine. And you don't have to worry that the Kohanim are going to try to move it along and prod it so that it gets really hot and really caught on well before Shabbat, because the Kohanim are zrizim. Zrizim means they have alacrity and they're careful, they do things efficiently, and therefore they do things with a lot of calculated thought. They're very careful about Yirat Shamayim, and they're not going to move it around on Shabbat. So it's an exception to the rule, this type of fire that you're making. Uvikvulin. But when we're out of the Beit HaMikdash, and you want to make a large fire before Shabbat, it's not the Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash here, then you need the fire to catch on to most of the this madura, this bonfire, before Shabbat. And then we're not worried that you're going to play around with it and try to make it catch on. Once most of it is caught on, it's fine. Rabbi Yehuda Omer bepechamin kolshu. Rabbi Yehuda says a fire that's being lit with coals, even if the fire just caught on to some of the coals, or a little bit of all the coals won't go out. So therefore you're not going to be trying to get them to stay on. They'll stay on. Okay, now, I think we shouldn't mix that up with when you have food on those coals. So then we want to make the coals hotter. Here, the point is not to make them hotter. Here, the point is that they should catch on. They caught on already. Once they catch on a little, they're not going to go out. If you want to speed up the process of cooking something, then we're worried that you mix around. Okay? Says the Gemara Aktosha, the Kama. We said that you have to make sure the food items on top of the fire, unless they get roasted on Erev Shabbat. How roasted? Little, lot, half, third, a quarter. So Kama Amar Abelazar Amar Rav Kadesh Yitzolim Ibod Yom Kima'achal Ben Drusai. So Rabbi Elazar Rav says Kima'achal Ben Drusai. That was a guy named Ben Drusai. He was a thief, and he used to eat his things on the run, which is a third. Some shitot hold it's a half. Most shitot hold it's a third. So that's how much it has to be, which means it's edible. Once it's edible, so then the person is already, even if it's not the best, the person diverts his mind from being mechatel gechalim. Now, there is a machloket about this later in Perek Kira between Chananya and the Chachamim. The Chachamim hold that Machal Ben Drusai is not enough. It has to be Mivushal Kol Tzarko. It has to be fully cooked. So it looks like Rabbi Elazar Amarav is going like Chananya. So that's what it would seem. But there are Achronim that say that it's specifically when you're being tzoleh. Here, the Mishnah is talking about roasting. So therefore, it could be that he agrees with the Chachamim when you cook something, that it has to be completely cooked, and not Kima'achal Ben Drusai. But over here, Rabbi Elazar Amarav is saying like Chananya, because here, it's not exact. Even the Chachamim would maybe agree because it's roasting. And therefore, roasting, a person would already divert his attention from it once it's a third cooked. So it's not for sure a raya that he's going like Chananya. Okay? But the Gemara will bring down Chananya here too. Itmar Nami, Omar Rav Asi, Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Kol shehu kima'achal ben drusai ein bo mishum bishul nachrim. We learned a few days ago that if you eat items that were cooked by the goyim, you'll get close to them. They'll invite you for a meal, and it will be kosher. You know why? You'll watch. You'll be the mashkiach. You'll give him a brand new little makeshift barbecue. He's an amazing chef. Your next door neighbor invites you for a meal, and it'll be all kosher. You buy the food, you buy the coals, he just makes it for you. And you eat, your family comes over, you be a good neighbor. Kiddush Hashem, right? Chachamim said, don't eat that food. Why? Because if you do, you end up going for all your Kiddush Hashems, you'll be eating by your neighbors. Then when you eat by your neighbors, you'll laugh at their jokes, you'll get friendly with them. Chas v'shalom, the Chachamim knew that that the Jews would end up marrying their daughters. So now, you're not allowed to eat their cooked foods because of this takana. When is it cooked? Let's say it was cooked already and they just finished the cooking. So at one point you have to say that they didn't really do much more, even though they did some. But once it's called cooked, then they're allowed to finish it off. And what is that point? Machal ben drusai, which is a third way cooked. If they finish the cooking process, it's not an issue. Tanya Chananya Omer Kol Shu Kimachal ben drusai mutar lahashoto al gabe kira v'afa pi she'en grufa uktuma. Chananya says, right? I tell you, Chananya holds it even when it's not just roasted, even when it's cooked. He says you're allowed to leave it on the kira. Kira was like an oven, and it was like, it was the same size. It didn't get narrow, but there was spaces for pots to be put in on top, so that the heat of the bottom of the oven would reach the pot, and the fire came from the bottom. So Chananya says, as long as it's ma'achal ben drusai, a third of the way cooked, you're allowed to leave it on the kira before Shabbat, even if you didn't fix the problem in two other ways. What are the two other ways? Grufa, which means you rake out the coals. That is a very easy, that's a good way. Because if you rake out the coals, there's no worry anymore, no chash, shema yechateh b'gechalim, maybe he'll turn around the coals. What are you turning around the coals? There's no coals. You rake them out. He's saying, even if you didn't do that, if it's a third cooked, that's also fine. Uktuma, which means if it's less than a third cooked, you have to resort to one of these two eitzot, these two things. Either grufa, you rake them out, uktuma. Uktuma is that you put ashes over the coals. So when you open up the thing to try to mix it, you'll see the ashes there that will remind you that you covered them and you shouldn't be touching them on Shabbat. What? Heker. B'diuk. So those are the two eitzot. That's what we do today. That's what we call, the last one, kituma, in Yiddish we call it a blech. I think it's a universal word already, right? A blech. A blech is that metal sheet that goes over the stove. That's kituma. So you can leave a pot of food that's not a third of the way cooked. If you're garuf, we can't really do garuf too much over here these days, right? Because you don't rake it out. If you leave it on, you leave it on. You can't take. Or ketuma, what we do is ketuma. A blech is a covering. We cover it over. That reminds us not to turn the... Okay, some people say that ketuma has to be. We'll learn a little about it much more in the third parak. That is what the third parak is going to speak about. Kira, amazing parak over there, coming up. Bezrat Hashem. Some say that today you can't just cover the element of heat, because that's not the real way that you get it hot. You don't mix around the fire or the coils. You don't play with them. What you play with is the controls. So many people say that ketuma, we'll talk about it then, is the controls themselves. But you have to cover the element of fire for sure as well. But also, many hold you have to cover the controls themselves. Okay, let's continue. So what do we come out of here? A third of the way cooked. There's no isur for sure by roasting. Okay? And we know there's a machloket by cooking, if it's a third, or mivushal called tzorko. And we learned, okay, fine. Says the Gemara, Einot nir netapat. You can't place the bread in the oven unless unless the top is darkened. Rabbi Eliezer said the bottom. So the Gemara wants to know like this: Ibaylu tachton ha'ech degabe tanur, or dilma tachton ha'ech degabe ha'ur. Now, the way it was that the fire was deep inside the hole of the oven, and then the walls around the oven is where you would slap this bread upon it, right? So obviously, which part gets burnt and ready quicker. The part that's facing the ur, the fire, the part that's against the walls, will take longer to be baked. So the Gemara wants to know like this. Was Rabbi Eliezer saying that the bottom means the part that's attached to the tanur? Okay, so let's say this is the wall of the oven. You slap the bread onto it. So
Take it to the bottom, to the top?
The top and to the top of the walls and to the side of the walls. So let's say this is the side. So you slap the piece of bread on. So was Rabbi Eliezer talking about the part that's attached, which means this side over here, this side here, therefore he's saying what? He's saying that he's being more machmir than the Tanna Kama. Then the Tanna Kama is saying what? Tanna Kama said, Kadesh Yikrimu Paneha. That part is closer to the fire. So, if that part is closer to the fire, so as long as the top part is already done, you're not worried that the guy is going to move around the fire, make the fire hotter. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, you have to wait until the bottom too. You have to wait for a longer period of time to get even the bottom. That's one pshat. Or the following pshat, that Rabbi Eliezer was actually saying, Paneha atachton means the part that's attached to the wall is the elyon. That's considered the higher part.
They might be talking about the same thing. They're explaining it.
No, so the problem is what's the machloket then? I'll explain in a second. And Rabbi Eliezer, when he said Kadesh Yikrim Paneha, he meant the outer part, which is closer to the fire. So if Rabbi Eliezer was saying Kadesh Yikrim Paneha, closer to the fire, so then what did the Tanna Kama mean when he said Kadesh Yikrim Paneha? Rabbi Eliezer said Kadesh Yikrim Atachton, Yikrom Atachton, which we're saying is the outside the part. And what did the Tanna Kama say? Kadesh Yikrom Paneha. Paneha also sounds like that. So Tosfos on top, he says that then the Tanna Kama is the one that's being machmer. And the Tanna Kama means, according to this side of the question, he means Paneha means both sides. And Rabbi Eliezer is being lenient and saying only the outside, the part that's close to the fire, as long as that's done, you're good. Okay? So it's kinds of, the two sides of the question will not just flip Rabbi Eliezer around like I told you when we learned the Mishnah. It's now going to
where the bread is.
The Tanna Kama himself is going to change. Right, exactly. So the Gemara brings a proof. Tashma Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kedei sheyikrimu paneh hamidubakin batanur. He says the part that's stuck to the oven, which would mean that he's being machmir. Okay? That means Rabbi Eliezer being machmir, that not only is the outside, the part that's close to the fire, you have to wait till the part that's attached to the oven as well. Okay. Now, we said the Pesach is an exception. You could bring the Korban Pesach into the oven right before Shabbat. What do you mean? It's not even ready. You're going to come to... So the Gemara says like this, my time, Mishum de B'nei Chabur is Zrizhein. Now, by the way, okay, fine. Mishum de B'nei Chabur is Zrizhein. Because the B'nei Chabura are quick. There's a Rashi in Erevin that says, why? Because seemingly you could say it just means like, oh, there's a whole group of people involved. So one reminds the other, hey, what are you doing? We're all involved. It's not one man in his house with his little oven. It's a whole bunch of people, us three over here, and then...
There's no pacha that you're going to come and do...
Right, because you're going to remind me and I'm going to remind you. But there's a Rashi in Erevin that says it's specifically about korbanot. It's specifically because it's a mitzvah of korban. So therefore our minds are very, very, right, zrizunheim, like the Kohanim. You don't want to mess up the korban, right? It's not just a group. So there's a lot of people to remind each other. Okay, but that's the reason why, and therefore there's no chash. So the Gemara says, Holav hochilo. So you're telling me if without the reason that the Bnei Chabura is reason, then you wouldn't be allowed to place the Pesach? What is the Korban Pesach, Rabbatai? The Omar, the Korban Pesach is a gedi, or a sheep, baby. The Omar, we learned before, okay? What did we learn? Gadi ben shrik ben lo shrik shapidami. That a gadia, a goat, whether the oven is closed and whether it's not closed, even if it will be easy to open the oven, it's not sealed with tit, with mortar, and it will be easy to open the oven. Since we have one reason, remember we said as long as you have one reason that he won't open the gedi because the wind is bad, it's harmful for the gedi, that's enough to remind you not to open, and therefore it's mutar.
Because it's not good for the goat.
It's not good for it. So if it's not good for it, so then why do you have to say Korban Pesach? Korban Pesach is a gedi. So if it's a gedi, then even if it wasn't a Korban Pesach, and there was no chabura, it was just that same animal on Erev Shabbat in your home because you want to eat it like this Shabbat, not Erev Pesach. So why do you, right? That's the Gemara's kasha. You made it like it's Korban Pesach because it's Bnei Chabura. So the Gemara says Hatam the Mintach, because Hatam Mintach there in that Gemara it was cut up. Once you cut up the pieces, like a regular Suda, you're not going to have a whole gedi usually, right? Put a pan that's already cut up, the gedi. So that's when it's harmful for it. But on the Korban Pesach, that you have to do it rosho al kra'av val kebab, right? Val kebo, you have to roast it whole. So lo mintach, it's not cut. It's not cut. If it's not cut, the wind is not so harmful. So if it's not harmful, then we are afraid that you're going to open it up. If it's not harmful, you'll open it up, and therefore you need another reason of Bnei Chabura. The only reason why the Mishnah says it's okay is because Bnei Chabura. Don't tell me the reason is because you're not going to open it. You will open it by Korban Pesach, because it's whole by the Korban Pesach. And that's why the Mishnah had to say the reason why we don't have a worry is because it's a Bnei Chabura. Now everybody asks that according to Rav Ashi, Rav Ashi said before that you're allowed to put any meat in the Tanur b'Shabbat, and you're not worried that he's going to open it up. Okay? So, you remember Rav Ashi said any meat? So why is it only Korban Pesach? So according to Rav Ashi, he wasn't worried about anything. There was one girsa in Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi wasn't worried about anything by meat. So the answer that according to Rav Ashi, this Mishnah here that says only Pesach and not all meats, is speaking about an opened oven. Rav Ashi was saying if it's closed, you're not worried. By the time he goes in and has to open it, he'll remind himself. But what about if it's totally opened? Then Rav Ashi would agree. But by Korban Pesach is an exception even according to Rav Ashi because of Bnei Chabura. Okay. In this big fire that they had for the Kohanim in this side office called the Lishkat Beit HaMoked, the Kohanim would sit around and warm themselves up. The Kohanim that were doing the Avodah in the Beit HaMikdash, they would go to the side rooms, this great room of the Beit HaMoked. So it says there that Umachizin, what was the Lashon in the Mishnah? Even if a little bit of just a few of the pieces of wood were lit before Shabbat, they want to get warm. So aren't you worried that they're going to try to get the other piece of wood to catch fire? And they'll forget about Shabbat? Just like all these things? No. In the Beit HaMikdash, is reason, no problem. So the Gemara says, how do you know this? Last week's parasha. Only you may not kindle a fire in all of your dwellings, meaning in all of your dwellings. That's the inference. But if it's not your dwellings, it's in the Beit HaMikdash, which is not a dwelling of Klal Yisrael, there, the Torah is saying that you're allowed to light a fire on Shabbat. Amazing, right? So therefore, so the Gemara says, that's why, if it's before Shabbat, and some of the wood got lit, you're not worried about Shami Yechateh B'Gechalim, because what's the problem? He's going to move Shami Yechateh B'Mdurat HaEsh, he's going to mix around the piece of wood, he's going to try to get some wood to light up. Because even if he does it, he's fine. On Shabbat. Because the Beis HaMikdash, there's no Yisur of Havara. So the Gemara says, if there's no Yisur of Havara on Shabbat, so then even on Shabbat itself, why does the Mishnah say, okay, if you light it before Shabbat, even if you light a little bit of it, we're not worried. What do you mean, if you light it before Shabbat? Let the Mishnah say that on Shabbat itself, not on Erev Shabbat, this whole Mishnah is Erev Shabbat. On Shabbat itself, go light the fire in the Beit HaMikdash. Doesn't say that. So obviously, the pasuk is not saying that. Elo Amar Rav Chizda Kra Ki Ata Lemishu Yevarim Pedarim Udata. The Mishnah is only the halacha is that only the evarim and the pedarim, the fats and the limbs that were from the Tamid Shel Ben HaArbaim, the afternoon daily offering that was brought in the afternoon. So let's say the one that was brought on Erev Shabbat, right? So let's say those pieces of limbs were not yet burnt. So then the Torah is saying, Lo tevaru esh b'chol moshvotechem, don't kindle fire in all your dwellings, and the inference is your dwellings, but not in the Beit HaMikdash. There you can burn, because there's a mitzvah, commanded, to burn the evarim and pedarim, these limbs, on the Mizbeach. So if they weren't burnt yet, do them on Shabbat as well. Okay? And you can burn them on Shabbat. Because the fire you're making is for the avodah. Okay? It's for the avodah. That's why there's a special heter in the Torah. Okay. However, the hadlaka of the Beit HaMoked, Rabotai, there, of course, you're not allowed to light it on Shabbat. You can only light it on Erev Shabbat. So then if you light it on Erev Shabbat, what's the reason? You don't have a pasuk anymore for Erev Shabbat. For Beit HaMoked to do it on Shabbat. So that's why you're only allowed to do the Beit HaMoked on Erev Shabbat. But so then what's the reason why they allowed you to do it on Erev Shabbat, even if just a little bit of the fire is on? So the Gemara says the reason is the Kohanim's reason, hey? Because the Kohanim has reason. Not because of the pasuk that you're allowed to do it on Shabbat. There is no pasuk for the Beit HaMoked. The pasuk is only for the Srefat Evarim and Ptarim of the Korban Tamid Shel Ben HaArbaim. Tov? Okay. So then it says like this, Uvagevulin kedei shete'echoz. Ha'or berubo. Remember the Mishnah said, but if you're not in the Beit HaMikdash, meaning you're not around Kohanim, it's just a regular person in the rest of Eretz Yisrael. If you make a fire, you have to make sure that the fire lights most of the wood. So the question is, what does that mean most? What most? Most of what? Mai beruban. Mai ruban. And then after it does most, whatever most means, now a person will relax and not be worried that the fire won't catch on. Everything will just happen by itself now. He's good. Omar Rav, Rov kol echad ve'echad. The majority of every single one of the pieces of wood there. Shmuel Amar, less. You don't need to, that's a lot that Rav said. When you get to the point where the person in charge of the fire doesn't say, oh, I need more firewood, bring some. Once he gets to the point that he's comfortable, he doesn't need to bring any more wood, then...
That's why Rav says, Kol echad rubo. That if there's a couple more pieces of wood, then you're going to want to bring them. inside. Does it mechatek? If you have, let's say there's 100 pieces of wood, all the 100 needs to be fired, but rubo.
Right, but Rav is already after the stage that the person already stopped saying it.
Stop what?
The person in charge, he already stopped asking for wood. Rav says, "Zelo maspik." Zelo maspik, that he stopped calling for wood. You have to have each piece of wood has to be lit. And most of it has to be lit. Shmuel says once the guy stopped asking for more wood, even if all the pieces aren't mostly lit, it's fine. Okay, now the question is, according to Shmuel, how does he translate the word biruban? He said when the guy starts asking for wood, what does that have to do with the word ruban? Ruban of what? It's a good question, right? So some say that ruban means that that there's a point. Okay, there's many different pshatim in the word ruban for Shmuel. One pshat is that it has to be most of them in the fire. Let's say there's 100 pieces of wood there, 80, maybe 51, maybe. So once it's the majority, then it's going to catch on. And at that point that it's the majority, the person will stop saying, "Bring me more." He's only going to say, "Bring me more," if it's the minority that's caught on. Once it's the majority that catches on, okay, then he's going to stop asking for more. That's what it means, Ruban. That's one pshat. Rashi says, I think Rashi says,
he's not adding on more to the fire, he's just lighting up more than what's already there.
But Rashi says, I mean that these are already lit. There's already a fire there, the end.
Give me more to light the rest up. Meaning, what he's bringing is not more fire to put into the meduah, just to light up the rest.
That's here. But how much is here? How much? So you're saying that what's here, that's what the word ruban is. Rov of them are lit up. Yeah, that's how they want to say it. That the rov is lit. According to Rav, rov is lit. That's very nice. I need everyone lit, rov of each one lit. Okay, fine. Tana Rav Chia l'siyu l'Shmuel. Rav Chia brought support for what Shmuel said. כדי שתהא שלבת עולה מאליה ולא שתהא שלבת עולה על ידי דבר אחר. It says there, now what is that talking about there? Some say it's talking about a regular fire, and it's a bright that it's saying that when you make a fire out of the Beit HaMikdash on Erev Shabbat, you have to light it so that the shalhevet, the flame, will be ole me'eleh, will just go up by itself. Okay? And it doesn't need any more help from anything else. So as the meaning to say, it doesn't have to be mostly lit. As long as you don't need to bring more firewood, al yedei davar acher, you're good. That's how some learn. The bright is he's talking about mamash the same case as Shmuel in the Mishnah. Others learn that it's actually talking about the menorah. And there's a halacha that Rashi brings this down. That lahalot ner tamid. Okay? That what's the menorah need? The menorah needs, when you light the menorah, what's the mitzvah? You have to light it that it won't go out. Because it always has to be lit. So if you light it in a way that it will go out, so then you're not lighting it in a way that it's going to go out. That's not the right way of lighting it. So it has to be and it doesn't need help from anything else. Okay? So that's the way Tosafot explains. So Rashi brings down that both pshatim. Okay, so the Gemara is like this. Eitz yichidi. You have a thick piece of wood, a log. Okay? Rav Omar Rov Avyo ve'amila b'rov hekefo. Rav says, how much of that piece of wood has to be lit before Shabbat? For you to light that before Shabbat, that you won't be playing with it to try to get just one big piece of thick wood. So Rav says most of its thickness has to be burnt already, through and through. Some say that Rav said rov hekefo. You just need most of its circumference, the outside, not the inside. Therefore, since there's two opinions of what Rav said, we do both. Now, okay. So the Gemara says like this. Ketanoi. These two opinions of what Rav said is really a machloket tanaim. Because the Braita says, the uman, the craftsman, wants to work with wood. Once you give him a piece of burnt wood,
There's nothing to do with it.
nothing to do with it. What's that point? That point is when it goes through and through. If it's just charred around the rov hekefo, you see, he just takes that part off and he can use the inside. Inside's not burnt. So therefore, this pshat of Chia is rov of yo. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer, k'dei shetoch az ha'esh v'shnei tzadin, which is hekefo. Ve'ava b'shein raya ledavar, even though there's no proof, zeicher ledavar, there's a little bit of a hint to it, because the pasuk in Yechezkel compares Klal Yisrael. The people in Yerushalayim then were not doing the right, doing mitzvot, so he compares them to a vine. He compares them to a vine. And this vine is not bringing out any fruits. Now the vine is even worse than other eitzim, because you can't do anything with the vine other than firewood. And says the pasuk that once the two sides, et shnei kitzotav achla ha'esh, both sides of the vine were eaten by the fire, v'tocho nachar, and the inside became dried out. Hayitzlach lemelacha. Is that going to work for you? You'll be able to work with it? You can't work with it anyways, and especially if it's burnt on both sides. So, therefore, you see here that what? That once something is already burnt on both sides, it's considered done. Okay? It's not. You can't use it for any more melacha, and it's not a complete raya, says the Gemara, but it's a little bit of a proof. So then the Gemara brings a machloket about another pasuk. The pasuk is talking about the Yirmiyahu Hanavi sent a Megillah to the king Yehoiakim, and the letter Yirmiyahu Hanavi told him Yerushalayim is going to be destroyed, so you better get ready. You better do teshuvah. So they burnt that letter over there, Yehoiakim. So it says that the king was sitting there, Yehoiakim, the ha'ach nefanav mivo aret, and the ach before him was burning. What does that mean? My ach, amarav achvana. Rashi says arava. Okay, Rashi says arava means it was a willow. Arava. That's what was burning before him. Ushmul Amar, what that pasuk means is eitzim shenidliku be'achvana. That the wood was sitting there in brotherhood. Brotherhood means that each one of the pieces of wood was lighting the other, and they were all lighting each other. Okay? There was a man that said, "Who wants achvana?" He was selling things. And it was found that he was selling aravot. So this is another proof that ach means aravot. Now, does this have anything to do with the Gemara? Or it's just talking about lighting fires, some pasuk? So you could say like that The ones we're talking about the topic of lighting fire, so we want to know what that fire was in that pasuk. Others want to compare it to our Gemara. I'm not sure how, but I have a feeling that Shmuel is saying Sheniduku b'achvana means because Shmuel's shita is that once you have 51%, then there's a brotherhood, then they light each other. That's what it means. In the pasuk is a little bit of a raya to Shmuel. Ayin da'achroinim. Okay. Amar Rav Huna. Kanim en tzichim rov. If you have kanim, reeds, and you're making a fire with the reeds, you don't need most of them to be lit. Like we said, rov, the Mishnah said rov, that is not by little reeds. Because reeds, they just catch fire by themselves. Only agdan, if you have them in a bundle, so then it will be hard for the fire to catch inside. Tzurchin rov. Therefore, then they need rov back to the old din in the Mishnah. Garinin, same thing. They used to use as fire fuel, they would have these dried date pits. Ein tzurchin rov. You don't need most. Natnan b'chotalot, because they catch fire right away. But if you put them in these baskets that were woven from lulavim, then they're all together. It will be hard for them to catch fire. Then we're worried that you might come and play around with the fire. Then tzurchin rov. It has to have been caught on to most of them before Shabbat for us not to be worried. So the Gemara says, Matkef la Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda said to Rav Huna, Adarabba. Just the opposite. Ipcha mistarba. What's reasonable, what's logical is just the opposite. Kanim mibadran. Agdan lo mibadran. Karinim mibadran. Natnam bechotalot la mibadran. When you have pieces of reeds that are separate, what do you mean they're going to catch on? How's one going to catch on to the other? They're separate, they're spread apart, they're scattered. If you put them together, once one catches, all of them will catch. Same thing with the dried pits. If they're separate and scattered, why is one going to catch onto the other? Therefore, there's going to be an issue that you're going to play around with it. And I would say the opposite, says Rav Chizda. If they're put into a basket together, then you don't have to worry. Once one catches, they all catch. So Rav Chizda argues the exact opposite than Rav Huna. Itmanami, says the Gemara, Amar Rav Kahana, Kanim she'agdan, tzrichin rov, lo agdan ein tzrichin rov, garinin tzrichin rov, natnan bechotalot ein tzrichin rov. Exactly like Rav Chizda. Okay? So this is the proof to Rav Chizda from Rav Kahana. Tani Rav Yosef, arba medurot ein tzrichin rov. There are 4 fires, okay, bonfires that don't need rov on Erev Shabbat. They don't have to be mostly lit on Erev Shabbat for you to leave them alone. You could do that on Erev Shabbat, and even if they're not mostly lit. Number 1, shel zefet. What's zefet? Tar. Exactly. So tar, if the wood is in tar, it's taken care of. It's like a fuel. V'shel gafrit. Gafrit is like sulfur or something, some sort of chemical that also will light it up. V'shel gvina, or cheese. V'shel revav, or fats and wax. All these things that melt will be like a fuel to the fire. And even if the wood is not mostly lit, the Mishnah is not speaking about those cases because it's fine. They're going to get lit. It's only when you have a dry fire of just wood that the Mishnah's case that you need rov is applicable. In the Brisa taught also of kash and gvava. This is like the stalks or the hay, dried out grass, which is straw hay, or these they get lit right away. And you don't need rov for you not to worry. The the wood of Bavel doesn't need Rav. So the Gemara says, Matkar Rav Yosef Mahi, what is that? Ile Masilte. If you tell me that it's these little chips of wood which they would normally light in Bavel, so he says, so then, Hash the Petila Amar Ula Amad Lik Tzarech Sheyadik Berov, Hayotze, Silti Mi Boy. Ula taught us that a wick that is inside oil, and it's very easy to light a wick that's in oil. Still, you have to wait till most of the wick is already lit before Shabbat. Otherwise, we're worried that you might get involved and light it better. Silte, these little wood chips, mibai, of course you'll be involved in them. They're harder to light than the wick in the oil. So if Ula taught us that even the wick in the oil needs to have Rav, for sure Silti need Rav. It wouldn't make sense to say that. It's Kal V'chomer. Ela Amar Rav Yosef. You know what it means? Eitzim Shel Bavel. Socha de Arza. It's this branch from a cedar tree. They had many cedar trees in Bavel. So the branch had on it, it was dry and very thin, and it had like a little fuzz, like a little wool between the klipa. If you peel the bark and the actual wood, there's a little bit of a filament of a little bit of a like a soft, fuzzy, like a tzemer, like a wool around it. And then once that wool gets lit up, it just takes off, and you don't have to worry. It's easier than lighting a wick that's dunked in oil. And that's why there was a heter there that even if it's not Rav, it's still mutar. Rabbi Ba'aba Omar Zaza. Rabbi Ba'ama says the Eitzim of Bavel is Zaza. It's like a certain, also like a peach fuzz, a fuzz that grows around a tree. Okay? So if that's what you're lighting, you don't need Rav, because it's for sure going to get lit easily, and the person won't come to try to aid the fire and move it around on Shabbat, and therefore that's okay, even if it's not Rav. Hadron aloch yitziot Shabbat. Let it come back to us very soon, Be'ezrat Hashem. I'll give you some homework if you want. After Shabbat, you have to tell somebody the 18 Gzerot of Chananya. What are the 18 Gzerot? You have to say them, all 18, and then you have to add a few, because there's some that don't like those, so they have to add other ones. 18 Gzerot. You review it on Shabbat, and you say it over to yourself while you walk to your synagogue, if you're going to synagogue, or you walk around your room. You say them to yourself. Okay? That's something, then you take it home with you. Says the Mishnah Akdosha. It's Erev Shabbat today. So, B'Memed Likin. Actually, this is, I think, yesterday's Daf. Okay. So anyways, this Mishnah, the famous Perek, everybody knows it by heart already. But I don't know if anybody knows the Pirush, the Pshat. Right. Everybody knows the words by heart. So the words, there are things that you can light with and things that you can't light with. That's talking about both the wick and the oil. The reason why there's certain things that the Chachamim didn't want them to light with was because there were bad wicks and there were poor oils. Poor wicks and poor oils. If you use wick is the ptila. So the ptilot, the wicks, if they're weak or if the oil is poor, then we're worried that it's going to start getting weak and you're going to tilt the oil and you're going to be over on the isur, you're going to violate the prohibition of havara, of kindling a fire on Shabbat, because adding oil and making the fire better is that prohibition, right? It falls under that prohibition. And therefore they said you have to have really good wicks and really good oil. So what are good wicks and what are good oil? What can we light with? And which ones can't we light with? So it's a continuation of what we were just talking about, right? But it's not about making food ready quickly. It's about, on Shabbat, you have this fire here for light. It's not working for me. So the person's going to go and forget and tilt it. So you can't use lechesh. The Gemara is going to say it's like a wool that's found. We just had lechesh this second. The Gemara just finished with it. It's beautiful. So the Gemara says, Socha da Arza. That teretz. Socha da Arza was on the Erez. There's some sort of socha, some sort of wool in between the bark and the actual wood. There was like a little bit of a filament of socha, of wool. That's what this lechesh is. Now, this lechesh does not make a good wick. Okay? Even though maybe it lights up quickly. Okay, you see, let's not mix ourselves up with what we just said a minute ago. Before we were talking about a midura, a bonfire, right? Or eitim shel bavel. If you light them, right? We're not talking about oil. There's no oil there. You're just buying these chips of this stuff, so then they're going to catch on fast. So therefore, there's no problem that you're going to be involved with it. But if you're going to use it as a wick in the oil for your Neirot Shabbat, that's the new parak, then maybe it will light fast, like we just saw in the last thing. But it doesn't mean that it's going to be nice light. It's going to get weak, and therefore, there's a problem. Velo v'chosen. Mazachosen. The Gemara is going to say it's a pishtan she'eno nufat. It's a flax, okay, that's not yet combed out. So that's not going to light well. Velo b'chalach. The Gemara is going to talk a lot about chalach. It's a certain type of inferior silk. Inferior silk. A meshi, it's not kol kach tov. Velo.
The husk, I think, of the meshi worm, something like that.
The husk of the what?
The meshi worm, of the worm itself, I think.
The meshi is the worm itself? The meshi is the silk, no?
Yeah, what they come.
You're saying the husk of the actual worm is chalach?
I think that's what it is.
Wow. Okay, let's see the Gemara. I think the Gemara is talking about the silk. Let's see. Also, this Ptilat Idan is in this willow tree of Aravot, between the bark and the wood. Also, something there. It doesn't light well. People would sometimes use it as a wick, but it wasn't the best wick. Ptilat Midbar. It's a very long grasses that they would make ptilot out of them in the midbar. It would grow. They weren't the best wick. This is like the algae that grows on the bottom of the pnei hamayim, on the ship, on the boat, on the bottom. They would have the stuff that grew on it. All those things. The fire doesn't catch on well, and therefore we're worried that you're going to tilt and try to make them light better on Shabbat. Okay? Now, what about, not the wicks, the oils. Now we're going to the oils. What type of oils? The love is zephet. Zephet is like the sap of the trees. The love is sha'ava.
One second, why did the Gemara mention by Yevukashat Pnei Hamayim? Would you have enough, of lighting for using it?
They would use it as wicks. Stuff that grew on the bottom of the boat. In those days, they would dry them out and make wicks out of them. So, the love is zephet, the love is shava, the love is shemen kik. Not with wax, okay? And not with shemen kik. What's shemen kik? We'll see, the Gemara is going to talk about it. The whole machloket. The love is shemen sreifa. And now with oil, that requires burning. What in the world does that mean? The Gemara will talk about it. The love of aliyah, and not with the fat of the tail of the sheep. There's a lot of fat in there. The love of chelev, and not with fats. Okay, now, sounds like the same, right? Nachem Amodi Omer Madliki Bechelev Mevushal. Nachem Amodi says like this: if you already cooked the fat, then once it's cooked already, it's going to be a beautiful oil. The oil will be a really good oil and you won't have any problems. Even though the Chachamim agree that the fact is that once it was cooked, it's going to be a beautiful oil, but they made a gzeirah. They didn't want you to mix yourself up. Yes, cooked, not cooked. They said, don't use chaylev. Once you're not allowed to use chaylev, they said, even if it's cooked, don't use it. Yeah. Fine. So the Gemara says, lechesh, what is it? Shochad arza. Before I think I called it either shocha or shochad arza. Shochad arza eitz ba'almu, says the Gemara. Of course, you can't use the shochad arza because you can't make a ptil out of it. It's part of the branch. People can't make a ptil out of the etz, even though it's the inside part of the etz. But still, it had like wood properties to it, and it wasn't able to be made into an etz, into a ptil. So the Gemara says, all you can use it for, Rashi says, is for a medura. Ela medura, Rashi says. So the Gemara says, Ba'amranita de itbei. It's talking about, yes, the Gemara is saying, it doesn't only mean the branch, it means that woolly part. The woolly part that you can make, they made wicks. Okay. V'lo v'chosen, not chosen, Rav Yosef, ne'oren shel pishtan. It's bundles of flax. Well, the oret doesn't mean bundles, it means...
Sorry, what's chosen again?
That's what the Gemara is saying. Rav Yosef, what is chosen? Ne'oret shel pishtan. Which means, you have little cracked, tiny little pieces of the flax that broke off, and you can't make nice strands of flax anymore. So they would make wicks out of them. So they didn't light well. Amar le Rav Yosef, v'ktiv v'haya hachason lin oret. It says there that the chason will turn into ne'oret. So you see that chosen is not ne'oret. If the chason is going to turn into ne'oret, so chason is not ne'oret. So the Gemara says, Elam Rabaya kitana de dayek. It means, but v'lo nafitz. The process of making flax was that they would bang it down so that they would get rid of all the little, the bad parts of it, the sieve. But they didn't yet comb it out. They didn't really remove and comb out all these little particles of sieve. So they would take that pishtan, and they would make that flax, and they would make wicks out of it. So there, that the halacha is, Rabotai, that ptil is pasul for Shabbat. Because they don't draw the oil well, to them, they won't light up nicely, and therefore that's what it means when we say v'lo v'chosen. Now, v'lo v'chalach. So, we're going to see what it means. Amar Shmuel, she'altinu l'chol nachot yama. I asked all of the sailors of the sea, and what is this kalach? They said it's called kulcha. Kalach and kulcha, similar word, right? What is it? It was found on the rocks in the ocean. And it's like a woolly type of material. It sounds to me like an algae or a fungi, right? That grow on it, and they would make wicks out of it. Rav Yitzchak Bar Zeira Amar Gushkira. Yeah, so Rashi says, Psod Shomesh Yasuk Kikovim, V'hu Bait Hatolat V'korin Lo Fluyayl, V'novtim Oto V'tavu, V'osim Memenu Beged, V'asu Lasot Memenu Ptila. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Like what Amnon said, right? It's the housing of the worm that makes silk. And they would make silk out of that also, but it was an inferior, it wasn't a good silk. Okay? And they would make strings out of that, and they would make some sort of material. You're not allowed to use that as a wick, because it doesn't catch on to the oil well, to the fire, it doesn't catch on well. That's what it means. Ravin ve'Abaya v'Yatvi kamei de Rabbana Nechemia. They were sitting before Rav Nechemia, and Rabbana is like the word that they would use for Rabbeinu in Bavel. Achud Reish Geluta, who was the brother of the Reish Geluta. Okay? Chazid Havelevesh Betaksa. And they saw that he was wearing a very, very, fancy type of silk. That, you see what he's wearing over here? That's what the Talmidei Chacham would just talk Torah all the time. You see his suit? That's kalach of the Mishnah. Okay? So that means that the Mishnah is not talking about the inferior silk, it's talking about the best silk. So he says, no, we call that what Rav Nechemia was wearing, we call that sharia, which is shira is silk, pranda. We don't call that kalach. Okay? Abaye is saying the kalach in our Mishnah is not the great prominent kalach like you're saying. The kalach in our Mishnah is the inferior one that, like Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Zeir said, it's like the little shell that they made some silk out of, the shell that the worm lived in. So the Gemara says, Ravin didn't like what Abaye said. Ravin said the kalach of our Mishnah is the best type of silk. So the Gemara says, Meitvei, I have the question, Hashiroim v'akolach v'asirikin. Shiroim means silks. Kolach is another case. Chayavim b'tzitzit. All these types of materials, sirikin is very soft type of silk. Okay? So they're chayav and tzitzit. So the Gemara says to Yufta, that's a great question on Ravin. Why? Because you see that shira'im, silk, and kalach are two separate categories. But according to Ravin, they're one and the same. So you see here that Abaye is correct, that what? That kalach is an inferior type from the shell of that worm. So the Gemara says, we have a way to answer Ravin. We could say that the shirayim in that braita, which means silk, is one type of silk, and the shira pranda, which he said is kalach, is another type of silk. We thought at the beginning that shira pranda that he was wearing was the main type of silk, and that's what shiraim means, main type of silk. So then we said, you see over here that kalach is something else. But the Gemara says like this: kalach is shira pranda. That's what Rav Nechemia was wearing. That's not the regular type of silk. That's maybe even higher than it. It's something different than shiraim. And that's why the Braita by Tzitzit put them into two separate categories. Okay. V'lo b'ptilat ha'idam. What is ptilat ha'idam? Ahavina. Now remember we saw that achvana is arava. The guy that was selling. He goes, who wants achvana? We found that he was selling aravot. So the Gemara says, it's the bad part, or like the woolly part that's found inside the arava, the eitz of the arava. Okay? Between the klipa and the eitz. Now I don't think it means,
You can see it, I think, in palm trees today. When they start drying out, there's like a little, when you pull it, there's like a whole
strandy stuff.
Exactly.
That's it. Right. This is in the aravot. Right. Ravin ve'Abaye avakazu b'fakta the tamrurita. They were walking in the fields of tamrurita. Chazinu lahanu arvata. They found these atzei arava. Okay, these willow branches. Amalei Rav le'Abaye hainu ida detran. These are them. This is the ptilat idan that we learned in the Mishnah. You're not allowed to use as a wick on Shabbat because it doesn't catch fire. Amalei hayi etz ba'amhu. That's just a branch. How could you make a wick out of this branch? So Ravin peeled kalaf v'achile amranita de beni beni. He showed him the wool that was inside. Okay. The lo b'ptilat midbar. There's these grasses that grow in the midbar. What is it? Shavra. And shavra was this long grass that you were able to braid and make wicks. Okay. V'lo viroka she'al. We said she'al pnei hamayim, right? What is it? Ma'i ilem ukamta decharitzi. If you're going to tell me that it's this green, like dark green, or light green, the charitzi, what does that mean? Ukamta really means like black. That can't be. This green stuff that grows by the water, on the top of the water. Yifarchim. Those come apart too easily. You can't make that. I think it's like the algae that grows on the water. That stuff you can't make wicks out of, it will just fall apart. Elamar of Papa, ukamta da'arba, uchmeta da'arba. We're talking about on the green that grows on the ship, on the boat. When it sits in one spot for a long time, so that type of algae is stronger and you can make wicks out of it. And even so, don't use them on Erev Shabbat, those wicks, because the fire won't catch on well. Tanam. The Braita taught, Hosifu aleim shel tzemer v'shel se'ar. They added more types of wicks that are not allowed to be used on Erev Shabbat, of wool and of hair. Those are also a problem. Now, so look at this. So the Gemara is like this. Okay, Vitana Didan. Why didn't our Mishnah mention these two? Michvat Kovitz. Wool, when you use it as a wick, it right away it shrivels up. It doesn't light at all. But, and here gets totally scorched. It doesn't shrivel up, but it's scorched right away, and therefore none of them can be wicks at all. The love is zevet, and you can't use zefet. The love is shava. So the Gemara says zefet zifta. It's a thick sap that comes out of the trees. Shava kiruta. What we call it's kiruta, which is wax in Aramaic. Tanam. Now the Bright explains the Mishnah. Ad kam psul ptilot. Mikan ve'elach psul shvanim. The first part of the Mishnah was the disqualification of the wicks. And from this point on, it's going to be
About the oil.
About the oil. The love is defet. So the Gemara says, thank you. Of course, pshita. So the Gemara says, shava itzrichale. No, he had to tell you that shava was a problem in the oil. You would have thought that wax is also not a good type of a wick. Okay? Which means, if you make a wax candle around the wick, so using the whole candle, Kamash Velon, the Bright is telling you no. It's only if you use the wax as like oil. Okay? You put a piece of wax inside a cheres, a ner, and then you put the wick onto it, and then you say that that's when the shava is not going to work as oil. But if you have a wax candle, that the wax surrounds the whole wick, and the wick is inside the wax, then you're using the wax not as oil so much, but more as the wick. That's okay, you're allowed to be madlik.
Candles of our days.
What?
Candles of our days.
Candles of our days, exactly. Tov?
You want to go to the 2 dots or?
Yeah. Omer Rabbi Bar Oven. Itrana ptolta, ptsulta, dezifta, shava psulta de duvsha. Itran is the bad part of zefet. Okay? It's like this like oily part of the sap that would become like oil when you would fire it up when you would heat it up with fire. Shava, and the wax, psolta de duvsha. That's the bad part of the honey, which means the honeycombs that you would get honey out of them. So the Gemara says, "L'may nafka mina." What do I have to know about this? This is the garbage of the honeycombs. What halacha am I learning from this? The says, if a person decides to sell us, I'll sell you some shava. I can give you the honeycombs. And you can't say no. The person cannot say, give me a better product. Because this is, you said the word shava, I can give you this shava as well. And if you said to me, sell me zifta, I can give you the worst part of the zifta. Because itrana is also part of the zifta. It's part of zifta, it's not a separate thing. Okay. So B'ezrat Hashem, see you Motzei Shabbat.